Um, good afternoon. The meeting is now called to order. The time is 4:03 p.m. And can we get a roll call, please?
Montserrat Caballero. Jason Freed.
Good afternoon.
Casey Gift.
Present.
Taylor Pacheco.
Sorry, could you hear?
Okay.
Hola.
Dr.
Oh,
Cicada.
you're already taking attendance? Oh, man, I feel like a high school student that just zoomed into class when the bell rang. Sorry.
Dr. Cicados.
Present.
Dr. Toro.
Present.
Zenia Vidal. Okay.
Okay, are there any calls to the audience?
You missed agenda adjustments.
Oh, sorry. Are there any agenda adjustments? Okay. Now our agenda adjustments. Are there any calls to the audience?
No calls to the audience.
Okay. And can we, action item, we're at 4.1, minutes to review the minutes from December 17th.
Anya, did you make that edit on requested information?
I did.
Okay, I reviewed the minutes and that was the only edit that needed to be made. I will make a motion to approve the minutes. Good job, Tanya.
You're welcome.
Do we have a second?
Jason, I second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, thank you. Okay, now we are going to study action 5.1, which is school-based administrative positions. And I'm going to turn that over to Ricky.
Yeah, so last go around, there was a request to get additional information on that central administrator listing that I provided last month. And so I guess I probably could share it on my end.
Pull it up if you need to, Ricky.
I got it.
Okay.
So in the agenda, I provided information regarding that request, right? The request was for a listing of positions and that are supervised or managed by those central administrators that were listed in that original list. You wanted the FTE for those positions and the budgeted salary, not only for the administrators, but the positions they supervise. And you wanted the funding source or sources for each one of those requested positions. And so that listing is there in the agenda item. One thing I noted was that some positions in that list do not have a budget or an FTE info. And that's just for you to avoid duplication, right? Because like the example has the communications director, her position lives in the communications department, but is supervised by the chief operations officer. And so we didn't want to list salary info in two places, right? But we listed it so that you could see that the chief operations officer supervises the communications director and so on. And as in apples to apples, the only positions that are considered central administrators are those that are appointed by the governing board. Just to kind of keep it apples to apples to our school-based administrators, because principals and assistant principals are appointed by the governing board. So just to kind of make sure that that listing is there. So you now have, I think it's like 9 pages, 10 pages, 9 pages of all that information. All of the individual positions that are highlighted in yellow are the central administrator. So like in ALE, right, you'd have the Director of Advanced Learning Experiences. And these are all the positions that she supervises. These are the 6 positions. Now, you'll notice that some of them have multiple FTEs, like the ALE District Coordinator, there are 2 of those. So, you know, I compiled those positions by their title and consolidated those and provided you a sum of their FTEs. And so these are in alphabetical order by department. Ultimately, the grand total for these is there's just under 589 FTE that these central administrators plus those that are supervised by them, just over $37.1 million in funding. And they come from a multitude of funding sources, right? You know, some of them are DSEG funded, some of them are not. Some of them get funded, like the food services department. Oh, I left out the school safety department, I apologize. But like the food services department is funded by food service revenues, right? The breakfast and lunch revenues that they collect from the National School Lunch Program, plus any fees that they charge for a la carte dining, any catering. The community schools director, for example, and her department, they are only funded by community schools, which is just funding from tuition and charges to families for before and after school care, infant and early learning centers, and some grant funding. So it's kind of a little bit all over the place. So I just, you know, I don't want to go through the whole thing. This is information that you all requested. So I will just kind of open it up to any questions if you had any.
I don't have questions, but I do have observations. I'm having difficulty with my technology with settings and my display. So it looks like I'm talking away from you guys, but I see you. Anyhow, so when I went through, Ricardo, and thank you, by the way, for providing all of this for us. But one of the things that I've noticed, because again, I'm one of the veteranas in the district, and so I've seen how there's been different configurations within our district, within our leadership, when, you know, it's been effective, when it's not been as effective. And one of the things that in the decades that I've been in TUSD under those different configurations and budgets, I noticed that there was a significant and understandable shift in central leadership designations when COVID happened and ESSER funds came in, right? And I know I asked some questions about that previously. And so to compensate for a global pandemic and the needs of our students, there was a shifting in the configuration of central leadership. And I am one, and I know, well, I can only speak for myself, but I am one to believe that when we're looking at budget cuts, which are imminent and they are going to happen, and the reason why we're having these meetings is to determine like where we're going to cut. For me, the place where I don't want to touch is in the trenches at the schools with the kids, with the admin, you know, with all of them. Like anything that it directly impacts a student, I want to leave untouched. That's me. Like enrichment programs, like OMA, all those, PE at the high school level, graduation requirement. Like I don't want to see TUSD touch those for budget cut considerations. But what I did notice, and well, I was looking at all the pages. I think you said 9 pages, right, Ricardo? I saw that there are ways that we can streamline back to how we used to do things, and it was still effective. So let me give an example. So we have enrollment ambassadors, right? And they're getting paid. Why is it not that we tell the front office staff at the schools and the registrars and hold them accountable for absorbing that responsibility, right? Instead of paying extra people to do things that can happen more immediately at the school site level. And I'm talking positions, I'm not talking people, because it can get very sensitive when we're talking about budget and cutting jobs, right? So that's food for thought. The other thing are like student mentors that are college students that are getting paid to do jobs that we school counselors and social workers can absorb. Like, we don't need that extra funding for those things that professionals with master's degrees can do. The other thing too, I alluded to this at the last meeting, because again, I've been with the school counseling department well, 25 years now. And so I remember seeing how the leadership for the school counseling department used to be under student services. That was one. The other one was that we had 2 coordinators doing everything, and it was effective. They were capable. They had a well-oiled running machine, right? I don't particularly recommend, 2 coordinators now, maybe 3 coordinators that can do the 3 to address the domains in school counseling, which are career, academic, social, emotional, based on the grades of the schools, right? For elementary, middle, and high school. I mean, there's different ways that could be handled, but there's no need to have, because I've lived it and I've seen my leadership work effectively without having all these extra people now that are getting paid a significant amount of money, when before those positions weren't available and we were still working well. So I'm thinking, okay, and then I also saw in the 9 pages, there were some admin leadership at the district level. Some had 2 assistant secretaries. The majority of them had 1, but I think I saw at least 1 or 2 that had 2 administrative secretaries. And I'm thinking, okay, how can we streamline that? Why is that admin person having 2 administrative secretaries? And so, cutting it that way, again, streamlining it, bringing the pendulum back to center, because it went from, from COVID to one extreme. Now we got to bring it back to center and say, okay, where can we cut safely without touching the budget of the school sites? All right, and I'm done.
And okay, the only comment I will make to all of that is, if some of those services are streamlined back, like for example, you mentioned counselors related to those college mentors. The idea is to not then provide compensation to those counselors to take on the added duties of those mentors, right? Because if what we're doing is streamlining and trying to eliminate, if all we do is take, the funding that we were using for these college mentors, and then we shift some or all of it over to the counselors who are now taking a little bit of an extra load, we're really negating the effort that what we're trying to accomplish, right? So we just need to kind of be cautious around that, is that, if that's the suggestion, which, you guys can make whatever recommendation to the board that you want, is that we're really not looking to do a rob Peter to pay Paul. We're literally just trying to get rid of Peter. And so, to try to get as close to 0 as possible so that we can essentially offset the expense for assistant principals, because otherwise it defeats the approach. So I just kind of want to make sure that I lay that out there, is that we don't want to create unsustainable workloads that then create a potential for more compensation that the district is not in a position to provide, or may not. I won't talk in definitives.
Jason, go.
Thank you. Ricky, I had 2 questions. The first is the $37 million. That's the cost of the people and their benefits, but not, if there's other, I don't know, like technology, or if there's other materials or whatever within those individuals, we're just talking about the people themselves. Is that right?
That's right. It's not the operating expenses for those individuals or the departments that they lead.
Okay, and then the second question is for reference point. That's 37 million out of the district's budget is somewhere around what, 440 or 30?
The total operating budget of the district is over 718 million.
Thank you.
The other part to consider, just kind of along that same vein, Jason, is that if you look at the 9 pages, not everybody is funded from like M&O, right? So ultimately, all assistant principals are funded from regular maintenance and operations, our general fund, if you will. So if we were to eliminate a position that's grant funded or funded by DSEG or funded, by like anything else that's not, then it really doesn't do anything, right? Because we have to either find somebody on the M&O side to move over, and then we get into issues of supplanting and issues like that. So it's just something to consider, is that when we're looking at those, it's not an apples to apples in terms of funding, because we can't use food service money to pay for an assistant principal's salary.
Dr. Siqueiros.
Thank you. Ricky, do you have a recommendation of how we should proceed? It just seems like this is really overwhelming, a lot of data, a lot of different funding sources. But do you all have a recommendation of what specifically we should be looking at in order to devise and come up with a recommendation to the board? So I'm a little bit confused right now as to what our task is.
Right. I mean, ultimately, the task from the board is to try to determine what the future of these positions are, given the fact that the way the board adopted formula is constructed is not, it says that these positions are not sustainable, right? Just so either the formula changes to say they're good, or we find somewhere else to reduce in order to offset the expense of the formula. We don't necessarily have a suggestion. I mean, you got a pretty lengthy presentation from the regional assistant superintendents in regards to, beyond the numbers essentially story of the value of the assistant principal position at the school level. Some of the suggestions that have kind of been tossed around is, well, if some of the issues are around discipline or evaluations, the fact that, there's community events, especially, in all the schools, in the high schools, you've got athletic events and issues like that where the principal just can't be at every single one of these, and they rely on their APs to do a lot of these things. Are there other positions that are able to pick up on those? Are there substitute measures, to make up for, I mean, not everything can be replaced. I don't know if you can necessarily bring an outsider to come in and sit and do classroom observations, right? Which is part of the evaluation protocol. I don't know how comfortable a principal might be in having somebody from the outside do that. I mean, we've kind of talked and kicked around, but we haven't come up with anything, because ultimately it's gonna rub some, I guess the solution has to be cognizant of the fact that it's gonna rub someone the wrong way, right? Because it's not gonna be a win for everybody, depending on, unless the decision is don't touch anything, and then obviously then those 29 people, win, and their schools, obviously. So yeah, we don't really have anything in terms of an administration type recommendation for you. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna go Dr. Toro and then myself.
Okay, so then here are my two recommendations to proceed and to propose a budget plan for next year to the governing board. So one, to create a subcommittee to really go down this list and see where we really need to cut, or to bring the pendulum back to center, right? Because because of COVID, we had the cushion to kind of be a little well, to put in positions now that are covered now by different budgets that weren't there before, right? Before COVID. So we gotta look at that. The other thing that I want to ask, besides a subcommittee to go through this, is how much money, and I don't know if you, Ricardo, or Miss Luna Rose knows, if we were to have a subcommittee, how much money are we supposed to recommend cuts for? Like, how much is the amount that we're going to have to work with for next year? And then how much does that mean that we have to look to cut?
Yeah. Go ahead, Nano.
Oh, hi. Hi, everybody. I'm gonna actually defer to Mr. Hernandez, but I mean, I hear the tension in everybody's voices, and I know this is not a fun exercise. So all I really wanted to say was, we're counting on you guys to bring to us what you think is going to be most effective. And it's not, I mean, and you can come to us and say, this is what we want. And obviously, I mean, to the board discretion, we'll either take it or leave it, or modify it in some way. So, I want you to come into this exercise thinking, what's going to be most helpful for the district? What do I see myself as a parent, as a staff member, as a teacher, as a counselor, as a member of the community? What do I want to see that will make our district the most efficient? So I don't know if really the numbers are super important at this time, but again, I'm going to defer to our CFO to weigh in.
So just for to answer that question, so the number is just over 2.3 million. That's the value of the 29 that are currently over formula. So that's the target essentially if you're looking for a specific number. Now, remember the other positions that were, in addition to APs was the board was looking for any recommendations for changes to either formula or funding or just any recommendations in regards to counselor positions, PE positions, and librarians. If I know I mean, I'm tacking on to what Albert had just asked about, that it's a pretty big, it's already pretty big lift with APs, and I'm reminding you of more. But again, it's however you all want to present your recommendation to the board, as Natalie mentioned.
So real quick, I also wanted to say, and some of that where we started with this AP position, and I wanted to kind of bring it back. I know we opened this can of worms, which I do think is amazing and great, is that the AP formula is 1 to 500 students only. So that is the only way a building gets an assistant principal. That includes, and Ricky, please correct me if I'm wrong, elementary, middle, and high. Does it go to 600 for high, or is it?
Yeah, but they
Yeah, it's 600 for AP, right? And 500 for counselors.
right.
Okay, so
for APs, but they get one at the high school, like by default, right?
Okay, so then the high schools get one by default, but some of the and part of the conversation that I know both the board and I'm going to speak with my principal hat on, frustration is that when budgets get tight every single year, the first thing that, and I know in my, I've been at the district for 10 years, I've been at Valencia for 9. I've argued about the necessity for my AP. I do have 2. Every single year. And I know as principals, in advancing our schools forward and moving that needle, and as the associate soups presented, and when we've talked even in our budget advisory committee about the value of a person, $1 is just $1, but sometimes you can use it for a lot of different things. And you get more value for that dollar. And in those positions, I know that, like, for example, at my school, we have huge ExEd and 3 self-contained programs. One of my APs just sits over that and the rest of my population. I'm not saying he doesn't do other stuff, but that is what started to pull us out of needs improvement. And so as a committee and looking at that, I think one of our tasks is to also say, is just saying a ratio okay to say that? Even thinking for counselors, I'm going to go back off Ricky's thing, is just saying going by 1 per 500 for counselors is just quantifying that enough. And personally, being in a school and working with kids in our different situations, I would never say just a number is enough. Because sometimes you can have really easy kids at any level, and it's super easy with 1 to 600. And sometimes at other, there might be extenuating circumstances where you don't have that luxury, and it really, that one kid might be 5. So that we look at some of those kind of questions. And I know we've done a great job here. I do want to remind the committee before I go to the next people is that we kind of did already something about PE, where we, if you guys remember back, a motion about PE, how we had to, as the budget gets tight. So we don't have anything about AP or recommendations for AP, counselor, and library. I know as we got into the muck of everything and the money and, oh my gosh, is there places to do that? Now that Ricky's seen and we're processing and asking these questions, that can also be part of our motion if we want it. All right, I'm done. Dr. Siqueiros, you're.
Yeah, thank you. I want to follow up on what you just said, Stacy. Having sat in your or walked in your shoes as a school principal, and also having walked in the shoes of a central office administrator, I certainly understand both sides of the need, if you will. However, I tend to side more what you just said, Stacy, in terms of if we have to eliminate, let's not eliminate there, which I think Dr. Toro also suggested, because that's where, a school is not a school is not a school, because we all come with different challenges and different issues that arise in our communities and so forth. We can spend a whole hour talking about those things alone or more, but I'm with you on that one. I also want to go back to what Dr. Toro recommended, in addition to what you just said, Stacy, about a recommendation we can make as a group. But I want to hear a little bit more about what Dr. Toro was suggesting in terms of putting together a committee of some sort to look at the issue, and what are perhaps some of the items or some of the things that we need to look at and explore to come up with a recommendation, or for the board to make a decision based on that committee's work. Can you talk a bit more about that, Dr. Toro?
Yeah, so my vision of a subcommittee would be like Ricardo saying, okay, subcommittee, we need to find where we're going to cut 2.3 million for the 25-26 school year. That's the number. That's the goal. Más o menos, I mean, not más, not menos, but like you can't, minimum is 2.3 mil. You got to find where you're going to cut 2.3 mil. And then I want to also underscore what Miss Luna Rose was saying, that we need to, even though people can, and like Ricardo said, anybody, especially the people that are part of the 2.3 million cut, you can't get personal about that, even though we have to do the dirty work and we have to look at positions, not people, right? And so going back to Luna Rose being a representative of the community, we have to consider, as a subcommittee, non-negotiable cuts to be efficient as a subcommittee. One is the 2.3 mil mark. 2, what are our non-negotiable? Do not touch these. These are not going to be part of the conversation to save time and to be efficient. And then also consider community optics and priorities, right? The number one priority for the community, students. That's it. The students are the priority. So that is why I recommended that if we're going to create a subcommittee with a 2.3 mil goal, let's say, that we cannot, I mean, this is me saying, I'm not speaking for all of you, but for me, I'm speaking for Dr. Toro, that would mean we do not touch positions at the school sites. We do not touch principals, we don't touch APs, we don't touch librarians, we don't touch counselors, because the community is going to say, okay, why are you cutting where we need these people for our kids and to keep our campuses safe, but then you're not cutting people who can spend a whole week at least without even stepping on a school campus. So and that's where I'm coming from. Again, I'm not speaking for all of you. I'm just answering Dr. Siqueiros's answer. That's where I would say subcommittee, a dollar goal per Ricardo. And then if we as a committee here can decide, okay, what are our non-negotiable positions that we are not even going to consider at the subcommittee? They're off the table to be efficient. So we can streamline where we got to go and look. And that's it.
Thank you, Dr. Toro. Jason.
Thank you. So I agree with the sentiment from Dr. Toro, and I'm always going to be in the place of saying, you know, whenever you have to be in tough spots, you look at how, you know, ways to lessen the impact on students, right? That's the business that we're in. I'm not personally at a place of saying just flat out, we will not consider any site level cuts, because I think that's too strong, knowing the financial reality. That doesn't mean, to me, I think I would like to see us have something that maybe has something like a phrase. The site will be, you know, site staff will be held as the priority, and all other positions have a lower priority. And so to me, that just makes it therefore it helps people to know we're not saying that this is, you know, it is a possibility. There could be an assistant principal that needs to, you know, that position needs to be removed, or it could be, you know, whatever. I also think that one thing that might be interesting to bring to, whether it's through us or to some kind of a subcommittee, is as opposed to a hard number, maybe there's a range. And so assistant principal from, you know, 550 to 650. And some sites, there's an understanding, hey, things are really humming at this school, and although they would love to have an assistant principal, they're not in the same need as this other school. And so even though this school has 500 and you know, it has 630 students, and this other school has, you know, 555 students, this other school has a greater need. And again, you can't have that conversation with those site principals. There's no principal who's going to say, no, I don't need an assistant principal. Of course not. And every site needs counselors and all of the support staff. So I understand and appreciate all of that. I just think, to me, something that looks closer to, we are recommending to the governing board that you know, site staff be held intact as best as possible, and that you know, any potential cuts, that there is a greater attempt to do so at the district level. That's not, Ricky, you've done a really good job, just as a side of giving us both sides of the coin, where you have not, you know, you've made it clear people who are working at 1010 are working hard and doing good things, and they are there to support the staff. So it's not that anybody's saying they're doing nothing. Of course, they are doing important work, while you also, on the other side of the coin, is saying, but I do understand that direct in front of kids are the people who are out at the site. So I think that maybe just kind of just adds a little bit more color to the discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Toro.
So Ricardo, you had alluded to a school, I would say at least twice, because of, you know, the conversations that we've been having, these meetings. But you had mentioned that there is a school that qualifies based on student numbers to have an AP, but still doesn't because it was just not, it just happened to be that way for some reason. What was that school, if you don't mind me asking? Or
No, it's the reverse. Every school that qualifies currently has an AP, and there are 26 of them. There are 23 of those. What we have is we've got 29 of those where there's a school. So I mean, I don't want to pick on one, but we have a middle school, for example, that has less than 300 kids and has an assistant principal. We have a K-8 school that has almost double the amount of kids and has no assistant principal. So beyond the numbers, there's an inequity that is currently that essentially has now kind of developed around this because we haven't been able to address the formula. Those schools that are now on par with schools that don't have APs because, hey, you know what? I never met the numbers. And now these schools have fallen down below the number. We've created this.
So that school that you said has an AP but is below the AP number, is that a high need school?
Yeah, they are. I mean, they're all, to me, they're all high need school, but yeah, it is a high needs middle school.
Especially middle school. I'm sorry, Stacy, I don't know how you do it. But anyway, I never work in a middle school. That's a tough job. And I mean, not that high school isn't a tough job, but you know what I mean. Anyway, so then if we were to create a subcommittee, we would have to look at that as well, right? Like the numbers
Yeah,
and then
I would offer to the committee that the equity piece should be taken into consideration to the extent possible. Because right now the direction that I don't have, for example, is if ultimately we let the can kind of get kicked down the road for a little while longer, I'm still gonna have principals who are gonna say, I still don't have an AP, but that person over there does. And I have no way to address that. Right, because the board hasn't given me that authority because they've told me this is the formula. And that was a result of COVID. The reason it didn't,
I'm telling you, we need to come back to we need to shift the pendulum back. We gotta fix stuff.
Yeah, the AP formula was meant to be fixed by my predecessor right before COVID hit, and then it got essentially axed because it's like the district didn't want to let anybody go, obviously, during the pandemic. But this is the consequence of kicking the proverbial can, right?
Yeah, no, we got to change that. I'm not one for letting things slide year after year when we have the ability to make that correction. And I really feel for that principal. I would be PO'd if I was that principal.
And I just wanted to jump in to say some of the stuff in the discussions that we've had. And I think both Ricky even said that, and Dr. Toro, you alluded to that. As administrators, we would really like, and from this position and also on budget advisory, to be very, and by the way, Ricky can argue this, I think we're pretty responsible with our money, meaning that he comes back and says, you have this many teachers. We may argue it, but we don't have the freedom to get more, even if we want it, unless we create a grant or do all that other stuff. So one of the things that I've spoken with, if you actually look at other surrounding districts, our formula at the 1 to 600 is very high for other districts to just even look at a formula. So in discussing with them is more of that rubric based. Now that we know kids, now that we're smart, different levels, just like Dr. Toro, you said middle school. I have been a principal, and I've actually taught at everywhere from preschool to college in my career, and love middle school, but it does come with some challenges that are definitely I didn't have as an elementary principal. I do definitely have as a middle school principal. So looking at the levels they're at, support that they're at. So more of a rubric-based system for making those choices. Also a rubric-based system kind of, or sending it to committee to really figure out, like, not necessarily what those rubrics are, so that if a school does drop, I will talk about enrollment, because now that people can enroll one day here, one day there, it's on computer, enrollment is fluctuating, and especially after COVID, a lot. So when you are a principal and you are, let's say, planning for your next year based on the enrollment, if you have an enrollment spike, and then Ricky's done a great job at saying, hey, if you know it's coming, get that to me right away so I can give you a new teacher. That's still hard to plan for, because then you're behind the 8 ball. When you lose people and just going off enrollment, that's super hard. I'm also talking from a school who has dropped enrollment due to a lot of district factors. And And so I do think that there needs to be really looking at these positions, just like we had conversations about PE teachers and art teachers and which is the best for students. So really looking at those and not just saying, okay, I do think that there is a huge value in a assistant principal because of the different roles that they can put on, and I've seen them. That's not saying that I don't think teachers are valuable. Couldn't live without my teachers. But the day-to-day running of a campus has to happen whether there are teachers there is a crossing guard there, and those positions are flexed along with the reports and everything we do. So I think that there needs to be, like I said, more of a comprehensive look, not just and I don't think that there's time in this committee because we have to give it to the board to start saying something. Because I think it needs to be really looked at a humongous time period with specifically that target. Because I think Dr. Siqueiro said it, like the minute we start, we could go down a rabbit hole of all these different things. And what we've done in this committee, which has been great, has been really focused on how we would direct the board and then let them take it out to different situations or teachers or principals to help them guide when times get tough. Okay, next, Dr. Toro.
So, Miss Luna Rose, when is the deadline that we have to submit our budget cut proposal to you?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know if we actually sent we set a date. Ricky, did we have anything?
So the goal is to try to have it in February because schools are doing budgeting next month for 2026, and so we want to have information because Stacy knows for the last couple of years we're leaving your AP right there because we don't know what's going to happen. And yeah, I kind of hate to give that message to principals again. So yeah, the goal was originally mid-February.
Well, and also the ¿cómo se llama? Isn't the TUSD job fair on Saturday, March 1st?
Yeah, which is
So
why
then
we're doing
ideally, perdón?
That's why we're doing budgeting for schools in February, so they know what they have to hire for when March 1st.
Exactly. Okay, so Stacy, can I make a motion?
If you want to start a motion, you can make one.
Can I make a motion to start a budget subcommittee with the goal of recommending, like, Jason, can you finish my sentence? With the goal to create, with the goal to create a recommended list, having, what did you say, primary, secondary recommendation levels? You know what I'm saying? How did you word it, Jason? You said it well.
I was just talking about like ranges, like as opposed to having a set number of 500 or 600, or a range depending upon, like you had said, Dr. Toro, right, was the need, right, the severity of the situation, whether
what I'm referring to that you said was not the ranges, but like the priority of where cuts will be made or can be made. Remember?
Sure. Yeah. So I think it was the priority is to safeguard the staff at sites. Therefore, accepting that any position that's not an on-site position has a lesser priority.
Yeah, something along those lines. Thank you, Jason. Something like that, and that the goal, the date goal to submit a recommendation to the governing board be, okay, Ricardo and Natalie, please finish that sentence.
I do believe Ricky said mid-February. So
Yolanda, what are the two meeting dates in February for the board?
Yeah, I'm looking those up right now.
Yeah.
Just a moment, please. I have them here on the calendar. Those dates are, how come it's not coming up for me as quick as I want it?
Are you asking about the board meeting dates for February? February 11th is the regular one and February 25th is the special meeting.
Okay, so I think ideally, if we're trying to think about mid-February, the 11th is so a little less than a month from now.
So February 11th, so that gives you the governing board time to review our recommendation. And then that way you roll out what you ended up deciding is gonna be what we need to do for the 25-26 school year, so that by March 1st, all the principals and the schools and everybody know what positions they can or cannot interview for at the TUSD job fair on Saturday, March 1st.
I concur.
Okay,
I'm
and then
gonna, but wait just one second. I do want to ask Ricky, because I know how the district works and I know these subcommittees, and we're sitting, honestly, when you say something like that, and I know this is a horrible, hard decision to go, we're sitting at January 16th, the day's over. That's the 17th. Really, between then and now, we have 4 weeks. Is it 4 weeks? Sorry, my computer's weirdly backwards and I can't operate it.
Yeah,
it's like 3 weeks. It's 3 weeks.
Yeah,
we need to have, so staff would need to have the recommendation by the 7th at the absolute latest, so we can put it on the agenda for the board to consider on February the 11th.
Okay, so the 7th is the actual deadline for the
Because
subcommittee.
we gotta have all that ready to roll by the time the board meets.
Yeah, and here's my next question, Ricky. Don't I present to the board on somewhere around that date?
Yeah, you make the
So
presentation.
Yeah,
I'm
so
behind
that's,
you, but you make the presentation.
oh no, I'm ready to go. I got me an audience and you guys are all trapped. So I'm ready with everything that we've been working on.
You were born ready, Stacy.
Thank you. At the same time, I just want to make sure, because I don't want to handicap Ricky in this situation where it's like, once again, I feel like that's a little bit pushing it down. I don't mind the priority for keeping if that point, but saying then we have to have this other subcommittee, like to pull together the right people in there that are then maybe running schools or saying this stuff. Like, I'm just thinking about my own calendar and how we could pull together good people that would all of a sudden make this decision right away might be a little bit hard.
So this might be like a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. We do have a small group of principals that Maricela Mesa has put together to talk about this AP situation. They started having a conversation on Monday. They didn't do anything just because they've been waiting to see what today's meeting was going to be about. So there's a group of, I think, 3 or 4 principals in there already that are kind of ready to roll. If you want to just piggyback them and then tack on any members of this committee to that, if that's what you're envisioning. But from a staffing perspective, I think you've got some people who are ready to kind of jump into it to come up with a potential solution.
Stacy, the subcommittee can include us. Those of us who are in the budget committee can be part of the subcommittee already, because we've already really mentally hashed out what our vision and our goals are. It's awesome to bring people like like a member of that committee or that group, Ricardo, that you were just mentioning. I might be judging, but it's like they're probably going to come and bring. They're definitely going to advocate for their positions and the positions of their assistant principals. And we already know, we already have a school that we want to put an assistant principal at, right? So it's like, it's important that we have a diversified group, because you already are a principal, Stacy, and then Dr. Siqueiros was a previous principal. We already have that representation. We already know the value and the importance of that. You know what I mean? I just want to make sure we're going to have people in the subcommittee that are going to be more holistic in their view of the budget cut.
Okay, so I just want to clarify as we're doing this, and maybe this is just me, so please somebody jump in if I'm processing wrong. Is it two different committees or just one committee that's looking at really going into breaking down those numbers?
One subcommittee, because we only have 3 weeks. We need to work on this ASAP.
Dr. Siqueiros.
Yeah, so logistically, correct me if I'm wrong, Ricky or Ms. Rose, if any of us as members of this committee are on that other committee, we've been appointed by the governing board to be this, right? To do what we do. And there's a formal process that we have to go through if there's a quorum of our group in the meeting. So we have to be conscientious of those factors as well. So I just wanted to toss that out for us to think about. But I'm also kind of just sitting here thinking, we really don't have time to go through that process and be constructive and be thorough and gathering all the information that we need. I feel more pressure at this particular moment in the timeline of what we have to get done. And I mean, it could be easy. We just sit for an hour with this group and then we're done, or we just need more information. I know how challenging committees can be sometimes, and I'm not sure we'll have all the right people in the group. Is it just principals? Do we want parents? Do we want teachers? Do we want support staff? Who else would be in this committee? Also, as I was thinking about this, Ricky, I believe it was 2008, because I remember I was still there, 2007, 2008, as a central office administrator. We had a similar situation where we did something with school principals. I remember in elementary school that they were one principal for 2 schools. So it was half day at one school or half day in another school, or one day at one school. I remember how that worked out. But we do have folks perhaps in the district right now that were there at that time and can remember what those outcomes were. Maybe there were other ideas and other processes that occurred. I just can't remember off the top of my head. But just wanted to toss those few points to the group to consider. But I do feel that we may not have time to meet those deadlines in a subcommittee.
Like I mentioned, we can be the core of that subcommittee, because the more people that we add, the longer the process takes, because you know what I'm saying? Or maybe I don't say subcommittee. Maybe I say this committee really needs to work extra to reach the February 7th goal, to prepare a proposal to the governing board, so that they can then have time to review our recommendations, and then Stacy presents on February the 11th, as you know, formally, and then let all of this, everybody know, so that principals know what to hire for, what not to hire for on March the 1st. I mean, we can be that committee to decide that, but we really have to sit down via Zoom or in person, and we're gonna look at all of this that Ricardo sent us. So again, thank you for this report. It was really helpful. And then say, okay, we have to cut minimum 2.3 mil, minimum. I mean, we can't, you know, that Ricardo said that's our goal number. We have to hit 2.3 mil recommendation cut. So I'm willing to work extra on this because this is super important. I'm willing to work extra. I know that we have another meeting on the 22nd, but I recommend that we probably forego that meeting on the 22nd and make this the priority to like meet more times or whatever until we are ready to then forward our recommendation by the February 2nd deadline. I don't know, thoughts, people?
I'm gonna go Ricky and then Jason real quick.
So the only thing I would like to offer to that suggestion is that even if you have this listing of 9 pages with all these positions, in a lot of instances, I think it would be important to have those department leaders tell you what those jobs are. right? Me as a central administrator, I would hate for you to make a decision on any of the people that are under my supervision when you know, respectfully, you don't know what they do. Right. And I could say that for any one of the colleagues that work for me or work with me in a central department, right? You know, I can't pretend to know what, you know, the coordinators who work for Lorenzo in CRPI or whatever the case may be. So, which is only gonna, I mean, I hate to put it that way, that's only gonna add a little bit more work, because if you have targets, now, if you all have targets, like if you've already kind of come to the opinion of like, you know, Dr. Toto talked about like the counseling department, then, you know, then we can make sure that we have people, you know, that we have, you know, Julie Shivananda come in and talk to you about like why those people exist and what it is they do, to kind of give you the rundown so that you have an informed decision as to, you know, good to go or not, you know, but I would
So I
also
just,
think that,
oh.
that those people should probably participate to advocate for their people.
Okay, because I counted right now, your report, there's 40 directors. So are you recommending that we schedule a time for them to give like a 10-minute spiel?
I mean, we could either do that, I could reach out to each of the 40, give them the list for, you know, those positions and say, Budget Advisory Committee wants to know what every one of these positions does. I mean, that's gonna be a lot more reading on your, I don't know, like, it's up to you all, because obviously this is your committee.
I'm gonna give it over to Jason, and then I'm gonna raise my hand and I'll be next.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm struggling a little bit here, and here's where I'm struggling. We made a statement that we want to try to stave off any cuts at the site level, and yet we're looking at trying to cut $2 billion plus from the site level. So that, to me, like, that's a contradiction. So I do see there's great value in a committee of folks discussing AP positions and potentially site staff. Like, I think there's value there, right? And there is a possibility that in doing that work, through that work, there will be a recommendation of some number of assistant principal positions maybe going away for next school year. But I don't think, it doesn't sound like, I mean, if everybody's saying the same thing, which is to hold the sites sacred, and we believe that site positions and APs have great value, I don't really want to say, hey, come up this committee, get together with the goal of trying to essentially kind of right size APs, and in doing so make cuts. I think I would rather say, get the committee together and right size, come up with a better formula, a better calculus when it comes to APs. And in doing so, there may be some savings by doing that. I would rather see the cuts go from other places as opposed to APs, based on what everybody else has been saying about holding site sacred. And then to Ricky, the point that you just made, you know, I'm not suggesting that I'm the most knowledgeable of the people who are here. You guys have great insight. I'm fairly knowledgeable. I have no idea where, you know, if you said cut a position, cut a department, I have absolutely no idea. And having somebody come and speak to me as a committee member would not be helpful, because they're going to tell me how they're important, and they are important. And so I don't, that won't do it for me. I think I have some faith in maybe at an upper admin level is saying, hey, let's look at this at a real, let's like have some real, you know, real scrutiny of ourselves within the people that we are supporting, and let's look at where we can make some cost savings, I guess, as opposed to trying to call it cuts. I don't think it should be at the site, because we just said we prioritize the site, and I don't think it should be saying APs is where we're going to make the savings if we just said APs have great value. So yeah, I think that, to me, I would go back to our recommendation that says we hold the sites, and our recommendation is saying to the governing board to pass on to upper admin those cuts need to come from other places as best as possible to avoid cuts from the site.
Thank you, Jason. I'm going to turn it over to Taylor because you haven't spoken very much before I speak.
Thank you. I was not ready to speak yet, but that's okay. I'll figure it out. Yeah, I'm also like slightly uncomfortable with having a committee this close to when we need to make this recommendation. I think I'd be more comfortable with a recommendation that we prioritize funding at the sites and see what we're able to do with that. And then hopefully start next year on that same topic, you know, see what ended up happening with that, see if we're happy with where it ended up. And at that point, at the beginning of next year, have a little bit more time to form this subcommittee to make sure that the right people are on it, in hopes that the following year we can change whatever we think needs to happen. So I think that would also mean that we need to start earlier. I'm not sure if there's a reason that we start late in the year, but it just seems these past couple of years, it seems like we're kind of always pushing up against the end of things, that it gets so close here at the end. So I don't know if there's a possibility to start earlier or why it does start so late.
Anya, do you have an answer to that?
I do not.
So I kind of do. One of the reasons you start late is it depends on when we get the listing of the budget recommendations or budget topics from the board. So this year, for example, they didn't provide us a listing until August, which is why y'all started pretty late. We can make sure that, you know, that they get that done sooner, you know, maybe June or May, so that you can start in August versus waiting until August to come and go. So that's something, yeah. Unfortunately, yeah, that's one thing that's kind of fallen through the crack is when we get the recommendations from the board.
Yeah, I think if we would like to start with this as a topic for next year, I think that would give the board a little bit more time to decide the other priorities as well.
Thank you. And I do want, like, as some of you've been on here, I know Jason and I have been on here for 3 years. I think where we've also had success is not giving a hard number or an actuality, but more those recommendations at looking for where we can make, just like we did with PE or prioritizing, asking the board to prioritize different places. And Dr. Tora, I just keep thinking of you at Pueblo, your vision for what Pueblo's been in its advanced courses and getting all those kids in. Nobody saw that until you believed it and started making it happen. That's been huge at Pueblo, but everybody, just like Jason is going to said in the past, everybody's going to come in and say, I have an amazing program and I can't lose any money. I think it's more of our job in the budget advisory committee to say more of those recommendations, because I will tell you, even as a principal that is very involved at district level decisions, even, I don't know what people really do in all aspects. I have some ideas, and I have, because I've directly worked with them, but I also know there's amazing pivotal roles that if I were just to look at a piece of paper and say, get rid of this position, it would be absolutely detrimental to so many people. Because maybe at the middle school, I don't work with that position. So I do think that I would be more comfortable recommending that if that's what we want to do, is that we make a recommendation that as they're looking towards budget cuts, we hold sites in a more sacred space and people that are working at sites in a more sacred space. And then for those different positions, they create some real committees to come up with the rationale of, and my favorite, I use this with Ricky, return on investment is, what is that position, the funding of that position, adding to both the school, TUSD, and every student it comes encountering. Because just like I said, I believe that some positions are worth more than others. Not because it's bad, it's just because they interact with more kids. They do a lot of stuff. So So that's my personal feeling on our budget advisory committee. And then, like I said, even going forward, I think, Taylor, you said it. I know as somebody who does that, I can't imagine if somebody came into Valencia, I wouldn't mind if they came in and had a meeting with me and said, let's talk about where we can cut some places or whatever. And Ricky actually does that with us. But if somebody just said, by the way, now you're gutted, and now keep doing or don't, because I would absolutely 100% have to lose programmings, and I can 100% tell you it would annihilate the students that I was sending to high school on their successes. So that's just kind of how
So to work efficiently with these deadlines, because March 1st isn't going to move, February 7th is it. So are we going to do homework? Each of us is going to look at the 10-page report that Ricardo gave us. Maybe each of us can configure a recommendation, right? And then come back as a committee and say, okay, this is where I would cut. This is where I would recommend a cut. And then hash it out and then prepare something to submit by February 7th. And then I also would like, Ricardo, if you can, please, a report of the school sites, like how many students at each school site, the principal, and if they don't have an AP, and how many they have for the school sites. Can you do that? Por favor. And then that'll be another report we can look at. What do you guys think? Do we look at those two reports, do our own homework, meet again, and we each share our recommended cuts, and then decide on collectively what we all can agree on, and then submit by February 7th. So that means we would, well, I don't know.
I'm gonna go to Jason.
Thank you. Yeah, Teresa, I'm gonna restate. I have absolutely no idea where the cuts should come from. And I know, I know the people who are on here, and absolutely appreciate those of you who've been around for longer than I have. I can't, even if I analyze that, even if Ricky has each individual come in and speak, I'm certain that people who are working are doing important work. So I don't want to insult anybody by saying, yeah, but what you're doing really isn't that important, because I don't want to insult them, the person, nor the position, because I think it's probably important work. I think it's a piece that Stacy said. It's a matter when you get down to it and you start saying, you know, I really like being able to watch my U of A basketball game, so I need to have ESPN Plus. By doing that, we're not going to eat dinner tonight. Oh, nah, okay, I guess we're eating dinner tonight and I don't get to watch the game. And so I think, to me, our sites, that's the bread and butter. That's what we have to have. And so I don't have the expertise to say, here's where I think $2 million or X number of dollars should be cut. I think we collectively have the expertise that says, we are saying to the governing board, we are prioritizing the site. We want to see as minimal cuts from the site. There could be some quote unquote right sizing when it comes to AP positions, but that's really the only space that we're really seeing. And so those cuts should be looked at in a central way. And again, not to put down those individuals or those positions, just with an understanding that we've got to stay away from the sanctity of the classroom.
Thank you, Dr. Siqueiros, and then Taylor.
Yeah, thank you. I've kind of rethought this concept of trying to meet these deadlines due to the March 1st and then I think the February 7th date, whatever that was. No matter what we do, whatever recommendation we make right now, we're not going to be able to meet with any substance a good enough or practical enough or strong enough recommendation to the governing board if we put a committee based on meeting those two deadlines. I think it's an impossible task at this particular point. with all due respect to all the really great ideas that have been spoken about. So I kind of want to go back to, I think Taylor said it and Jason said it and a few others said it as well, that our recommendation to the governing board would be to protect the APs as much as possible to protect the sites, obviously, and then put together an internal committee that those folks know best what they do, where they could make potential cuts, and that committee make a recommendation of where to make those cuts if cuts are needed at the district level. I get it; it's really hard, but these are dire times, and financially we're in a difficult situation. But I don't feel comfortable making a decision right now to put together in such a short turnaround a recommendation to say we're going to cut here and not cut there. In other words, I feel more comfortable saying protect the sites and put together an internal committee that looks very specifically at those list of district level positions and see where we can come up with $2.3 million.
Taylor, go for it. And then Dr.
Yeah, as everyone was talking, I was attempting to type a recommendation into the chat here. It needs some work, but I'll say it anyway. So I moved to recommend prioritizing site budgets and positions that interact directly with students, and creating a formula for AP positions that is, and then I have a blank, like inclusive or understanding of something, I don't know what to put there, with a subcommittee to be created for next year to look at central admin positions. Shall I send that in the chat so we can see it? I just read directly what was in the chat, I know.
Not the chat.
I don't think we
you-
could send it in a chat
We
before.
can't
That was a
chat.
rule for Tanya.
We
I think
can't
Vanessa's
chat, so
teaching me.
Taylor, if you can share your screen,
Oh,
that would be better.
can I share a Zoom screen?
I just go down to the bottom where it says share.
Yeah, I didn't know I could share it. You know, I don't want to show you all that. Okay, yeah, that. Okay. I can't share a Zoom, like I can't share Zoom on Zoom.
Do you want to type it into a Word document and share it?
Yeah, yeah.
That might be easier because then you can type.
Yeah. We'll see if I can do this right this time. Okay, are you just seeing my doc now? Lovely. Okay.
In the blank, could you say comprehensive of school needs or community needs?
Well, see, I was gonna also include, and okay, don't freak out, but I was thinking, could we say that every school should have at minimum the one principal and one AP and then work from there? That every school should.
I don't
No?
necessarily know because we have elementaries. It's going to be elementary, middle, and high school. We have some elementaries, and Ricky, correct me, I think 2 or 3 that are big enough to have an AP. But we don't. We also have K8s in there, and now we actually have K6s because the district transitioned that, which I can explain is why Valencia, like for example, lost students because that's just a new thing that came out.
Yeah, we'd need to create an additional 36 FTEs that currently don't exist.
Oh,
Right.
if we were to want to recommend
If you
that.
wanted, yeah, if you wanted to put an AP at every single school, we've got 36 campuses that don't have one.
Oh, wow. 36 campuses don't have one.
Yeah, and none of them meet the current 600 to 1 threshold. None of those.
But
30.
I do think if you had that committee looking at it, you could say Is this a new K8 or no, K6, sorry. Is this, what are the requirements for there, and look at, they can handle all that fun stuff, not us. We just get to handle all the fun stuff we've done at this point.
And then I
Okay,
just want,
Jason, oh, sorry.
oh yeah, I just had a question for Ricardo. So my next question was, Ricardo, oh, okay, and I'm thinking, I know it's uncomfortable to consider cuts, right? Again, we're talking positions, not people, but you know, it's still people, right? But I see it as our responsibility as a budgeting committee, that it is our job to do things that, you know, like not always comfortable, but need to be done. And I might have misunderstood, so I'm asking for clarification, but that a committee be done earlier next year, but I thought the fact of the matter was that we don't have time to continue spending the way we spent this year, right, Ricardo? We have to start the next year already knowing what the new budget is and where we cut. We don't have another year to play with. Is that correct?
I mean, we don't have another year to play with, but what ends up happening is that if the recommendation is to keep the APs the way they are now, based on Taylor's recommendation, and then create the subcommittee that kind of just addresses kind of part 2, right, through this subcommittee, we're just gonna keep the cost of those individuals in the budget, and we're just gonna have to figure it out somewhere else, right? It's gonna be a whack-a-mole, right? So we've kind of pushed down on the APs, something else is gonna pop up. I gotta figure out what that something else is to make it balance.
Jason.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, so I'm with you, Taylor, except for at the end. I don't know why the subcommittee wouldn't be immediately, right? Whether it's a subcommittee or looking at, the assistant superintendents or wherever. I mean, again, I don't suggest that I have the expertise to know who are the people who need to be in that room, but it has to, because I don't, what I'm hearing is, yeah, I don't really want, if we know that we're in this situation, why would we pretend? And instead, we need to be looking at it right away. Again, I will add, though, having done this for a few years with Stacy, we don't get to make any edicts. We're making a recommendation. The governing board has to do it, right? So for us, having Natalie here to know, like, this is what, this is where we're coming from. Upper admin may say, no, we really need to make the cuts in X, Y, or Z. Okay, but and that's part of their job. That's what the superintendent and everybody else is paid for. Our job is to say, we got to hold the classroom, we got to hold the site above everything else, and that doesn't mean that other things aren't important. It just means that this is more important, right? So that's what I would say is I like it. I think we may have to, I think Stacy would have to be more clear in helping to interpret what comprehensive, looks like, what that means. It's as to make it clear. We're saying that that every school isn't the same, and 600 kids are not the same. A 600 elementary is different than a middle than a high. A K8 is different than, and so on. And so with that understanding, but to me, that would be the only pieces. I don't know that it needs to be specifically stated as a subcommittee, but I definitely don't think it should be something that we're looking at, creating at some other time. It should be created immediately with the attempt to make the appropriate cuts for next school year.
So my thinking with that was that this first part would be done by like governing board this year. And the reason I put next year was like whatever they come up with, having a team of more like community members to look at, okay, like did that work? Do we like that, or did we not really like what they came up with? So starting next year so that we know what internally they came up with.
Dr. Siqueiros.
Yeah, but and this is not a but and I think the reality is as part of our conversation has alluded to, that we don't have enough information about those departments to determine, okay, this department we need to cut this position, that department. We don't have that information at all in front of us. but they do. So our recommendation could be that administration gets together with those departments, and they need to cut $2.3 million somewhere. They need to make that determination, not us. And then they make that recommendation to the governing board that these are the positions that we can change. If they don't have any, then we have to come back to the table and have further discussion about this, or the governing board does, obviously. But there's no other way to approach this for this immediate level other than doing it that way. So I agree with Jason that has to be more immediate in making that decision, because we just heard Ricky say that we have to find $2.3 million to support the system principal positions at the schools. And so that's the only place that we have right now available to us to look at cuts. Or maybe there are other areas that we can look at besides the central office administration positions. So anyhow.
Thank you. Could we change that
Mhm.
maybe to say something like, Taylor, I'm just going to talk out loud. Community needs through a subcommittee while upper admin get together with departments to analyze where the cuts can be made at that level. I don't know if that makes sense to you guys. And I don't know if even upper administration is the correct area.
I guess I'm still confused on the subcommittee that we're referencing here, because I was thinking that we had just said that there's not really time to do that.
I was thinking the subcommittee was on the APs, like Ricky said, that was already ready to go, that already had started, was on creating a formula or looking at analyzing the formula for APs to create something that was more comprehensive of community needs, instead of just, and maybe we need to say that, instead of just a number is what I was thinking. But I don't know, if somebody else jump in there if I'm off.
Can I add a couple things? Could we not just say that the superintendent shall form a committee that's inclusive of a site level administration, department heads, couple parents, whatever we decide is appropriate to make that decision? Something to that level? I don't know.
The more people we involve, the longer the process just naturally takes because just of our human nature. And I already have kind of alluded to some central leadership level consolidations that I know wouldn't come from the directors because it would include their position that would be cut. So the human nature is to preserve themselves in their position. So you can't help but make this subjective. So the more people we include in a subcommittee, and maybe again, like I said, our subcommittee can be us. But I think that the more people we include, everybody, and like Ricardo said, everybody's gonna want to justify or I think it was Ricardo or Jason, everybody's gonna want to justify keeping their position. But we have to, and I believe that in our committee, we, for the most part, are very objective. We're very objective professionals, and we need that kind of mentality when we have to make these cuts. But the more humans we add to this mix, the more complicated it becomes.
Okay, so just in retrospect, because we're all professionals and this is a horrible topic, nobody, I like when money comes in. I hate when money goes out or we have to cut. You can ask my husband. Anyways, so we have 3 minutes and our time is up. I know we started this, but we do have one more meeting that's supposed to come up. I believe it's next week. Is that correct? Next week. Since this has been such a huge, both discussion and everything, I was wondering if you guys wanted to tailor keep what we have, and maybe we can make sure that Tanya has that, and we can use next week's meeting to process what we've been doing, think about this motion because it's such a big motion. I don't know about how you guys feel, but that's kind of how I feel as we've all gone over the place. And maybe when we come back for next meeting, that's the agenda item, is to finish writing this motion because it's taken so long now that we've had some time to process. What do you guys think on that?
I also think that we need to come with some recommendations. There's one thing we know we don't have, and that's time. Everybody knows that, right? So I think that for our next meeting next week on the 22nd, whether we like it or don't like it, we have to bring objective recommendations of where we think we can cut. Again, like Jason very eloquently said, prioritizing the sites. And that way we just keep working as a budget committee, with or without subcommittee. And then maybe, talking to people, also coming back and saying, hey, I reached out, I put feelers out. I was asking people, maybe we divvy up these 40 people, these 40 departments that were on the list from Ricardo, and say, hey, I'll take these, and we go out, we ask questions, we just get a feel for it, and then we come back with our own recommendations and work from there. I don't know. We just have to get working on this already.
All right, oh, sorry, Dr. Siqueiros.
Generally, I like that that paragraph, the recommendation. We need to wordsmith it a little bit, but I think we can reflect on it over until next week. Come back and put it as the first item, and then we can make it happen. I think that's exactly what we need to do, but just a little bit wordsmithing so it's inclusive of the right people. Because and without due respect, Dr. Toro, it becomes more subjective to me and not objective in doing it, trying to make a recommendation as where to cut, because I don't know where to cut. I have no programmatically, it's too voluminous of a dive into that stuff. But the superintendent and his core team have that knowledge level, and I think they would be best if they make that recommendation of what those cuts should be, not us. But we just recommend the process to the board, and they proceed from there.
Could we make the 22nd or the 21st for them to bring to, I guess, to our chair and sub chair, what those leadership people came up with? Or is that too short? Because there's no school on Monday. Maybe we need to push the 22nd.
I don't think, remember when we create these motions, and maybe next meeting, we could have Tanya kind of review the motions we've created so far, so that we can be reminded kind of how we did it, because we left it open. And Ricky, jump in if I'm wrong, but there's still budget stuff that hasn't been decided. So this rarely happens, but pretend we get a lot of money, then maybe we're not in as dire straits, or we do have to cut, or we don't have to cut. So when you're doing budgets, you want to give flexibility to the system, which I do think we have a good system in TUSD to make those educated decisions. So if you want to do that, like I said, I can have Tanya bring in, and we've worked very hard this budget advisory committee, and we've actually passed a lot of motions. So maybe in that, like, Tanya, we can for next agenda item, we can review the motions that we have already created one final time, and we can reflect on this to create a final motion, because I'm not saying that other things can't go on, but that we, even looking at February 11th, where I present to the board, that's really not very many days. All right. Are you guys all in agreement? I see nodding heads. Okay, it is 5:32. Can someone, I would love to end the meeting if someone would like to in second.
Motion to close the meeting.
Second,
Before you do that, Stacy.
Oh, yes.
So you had your 5.202, the standing item, and 5.3 of future goals.
Oh, okay. 5.2 request for information. I don't necessarily think our request would be that you bring together just the stuff we've already created. So it's not really information from other people, but just us to end review what we've done thus far. And same thing with future goals and priority would be to review everything we've done and to create the final motion for school-based administrative positions and looking at central administration.
So my request again would be for Ricardo to give us also to email us or how, or through Tanya, all of our schools, their enrollment and what they have currently, principal and assistant principal, what they have already or don't have. If we can have a report of that.
Perfect.
Thank you. All right, now we're ready to adjourn, Tanya.
You are.
Okay, do I have somebody who, Jason already motioned. I think it's a minute later. Tanya, well, was it Tanya that seconded? Sorry, or am I just making this up? I'm stopping talking.
I second.
Oh, perfect, Dr. Saketas. All in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed that just wants to hang out? Okay, perfect. Have a wonderful evening on this Thursday and enjoy your 3-day weekend. Thank you all.